This is an ABC News special.
In northern Iraq today, there is still a campaign going on to get rid of Saddam Hussein. It has been going on since the end of the Gulf War. The people who persist in this struggle do so in the name of democracy. But they are fighting alone today, and this is the story of how they were abandoned. For 6 years, the United States and the CIA were their friends and allies. The Iraqis knew the CIA officers who worked here by their code names.
His name was Paul. His deputy or his second was Tom.
Bob was here in Salah ad-Din.
I know John. He's the guy who's the expert on explosive.
What was your code name?
Ted.
These are some of the Iraqis Bob, Tom, John, Ted, and other CIA officers recruited in their secret campaign to overthrow Saddam Hussein. Covert operations to get rid of foreign dictators are very rare these days, but everyone in the Clinton administration wants Saddam Hussein to go. The former director of Central Intelligence, John Deutsch.
All of the leadership of this country cared about Iraq. The president, the vice president, the secretary of state, the secretary of defense, everybody cared about it, including the president.
But for all the effort to get rid of Saddam Hussein, precious little has been accomplished.
The truth is that Saddam Hussein now is stronger than he was since the invasion of Kuwait. He is defiant, intransigent, and he's dangerous.
Ahmed Chalabi is the president of an Iraqi opposition group which the CIA supported in its secret campaign to eliminate Saddam Hussein. But while Chalabi and other Iraqi opposition leaders want Hussein to go, they want more.
We want real change. We want a democratic change. We want elections. We want parliament. We want to live the way you do. America led the coalition against Saddam Hussein. And America have a moral responsibility because they left the job unfinished.
This program is about unfinished business.
Peter Jennings reporting. Unfinished business. The CIA and Saddam Hussein.
Good evening, I'm Peter Jennings, and tonight we're going to tell you the details of a covert operation to get rid of Saddam. Publicly, President Clinton is eager to explain that his policy of economic sanctions and military containment has reduced Saddam Hussein from a threat to a nuisance. But that was not the original goal. Privately, the administration concedes that the CIA's secret campaign to get rid of the Iraqi dictator has been a complete failure. It is probably with good reason that no one in the Clinton White House was willing to participate openly in this program. There are two important things to remember as you watch this. First, as everyone in the CIA reminded us, the agency serves at the behest of the president. And second, this operation has not been closed down. We'll be back in a moment.
The CIA and Saddam Hussein continues.
In April of this year, Saddam Hussein celebrated his 60th birthday. It was a strange celebration. Thousands of Iraqis were organized to parade through the streets of Baghdad. There was a brief overflight of military aircraft, but there was no Saddam Hussein. His generals were there on the reviewing stand, but Hussein himself thought it prudent to stay out of sight. After all, a long list of people would like him dead. The CIA is after Saddam Hussein today because the U.S. military didn't get him during the Gulf War. Not that they didn't try.
Do you want him killed?
Well, we don't do assassinations, but yes, we targeted all the places where Saddam might have been.
Brent Scowcroft was President Bush's national security advisor. He approved of the plan to target the Iraqi leader.
So you deliberately set out to kill him if you possibly could?
I guess, yeah, that's fair enough.
Bombs away. Altitude 30. It's gone.
And you didn't get him?
and we didn't get them.
But President Bush kept on trying. 2 weeks before the ground war began in the Gulf, President Bush encouraged Hussein's own generals to move against him. And he said so very deliberately.
And there's another way for the bloodshed to stop, and that is for the Iraqi military and the Iraqi people to take matters into their own hands and force Saddam Hussein, the dictator, to step aside and then comply with the United Nations resolution.
The president's speech was translated into Arabic and broadcast by the CIA into Iraq. But nothing happened. Even after the ground war left the Iraqi army humiliated, Hussein's generals did not move against him. And the U.S. military, which could have pursued him all the way to Baghdad, was ordered not to do so. There was no doubt by the end of the war that millions of Iraqis wanted Saddam Hussein to go. But the Bush administration was unaware that Hussein's opposition was organizing itself and actively preparing to rise up against him and take on the remnants of his defeated army. The leadership of the opposition wanted the United States to help. And so one of them, Jalal Talabani, flew to Washington.
I personally told them through our friend Peter Galbraith that we are planning for an uprising, and we have prepared the ground for it.
Ambassador Peter Galbraith was then the staff director of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
On the day the war ended, I contacted the National Security Council on behalf of Talabani, the Kurdish leader, and asked if he couldn't have an appointment, that he was planning the uprising. And he told me that they were planning an uprising. So it was critical information to impart. I was angrily rebuffed.
Talabani could not get through because no one in the Bush administration was allowed to talk to him. Strange as it seems, until the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein was an ally of the United States, and American officials were not allowed to talk to his enemies. Somehow the rule had not been changed. So the Bush administration was taken by surprise when the Iraqi rebellion began. At first it was very successful. As it reached the southern city of Karbala, loyal Iraqi troops were pinned down by the rebels. And very quickly, the rebellion spread across southern Iraq.
All the people of Iraq are standing for the sake of liberating their people and their country. We've had it, that's enough.
And within several days, Iraqi opposition forces in the north joined the insurrection, and they actually drove Saddam Hussein's army out of the north altogether. The Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani took part in the northern campaign.
For us, the uprising was a reaction against a system under which we had suffered for 20 years. We considered the Gulf War as our opportunity to be liberated.
U.S. intelligence reported that the rebellion had spread to 14 of Iraq's 18 provinces. It looked as though Saddam Hussein might actually be brought down. His chief of military intelligence was General Wafiq Samurai.
The uprising almost succeeded. I will tell you a secret. At the very end, we had only 2 days of Kalashnikov bullets left over in the warehouses of the Iraqi army. The situation was very, very dangerous.
Saddam Hussein was rejected massively by the people. They did that, the Iraqi people did that, because they felt that the West, and led by the United States, wanted to see Saddam finally go.
But the Iraqi opposition completely misjudged the Bush administration's reaction.
And what did you think of it at the time?
I, frankly, wished it hadn't happened, because the military were faced with the problem of maybe a revolution inside Iraq. And they put the revolution down rather than turning their wrath against Saddam Hussein.
Do I state it correctly when you say that having seen the rebellion develop, you would have preferred a coup?
Oh, yes. Yes, we would. We clearly would have preferred a coup. There's no question about that.
But the Bush administration misjudged the generals. Instead of turning on Saddam, they turned on the Iraqi people, and they crushed the rebellion. Tens of thousands of Iraqis were killed, Many were rounded up and executed, their bodies thrown into mass graves. And the United States did nothing to stop it. The Iraqi opposition was outraged. Ahmed Chalabi. And what do you think that people expected the United States to do?
They would expect the United States to act as a country which has just defeated another army.
But in the ceasefire negotiations between the Iraqi army and the United States, even as the rebellion was underway, General Schwarzkopf gave Saddam's generals permission to use the one weapon they needed to crush the rebellion, their armed helicopters. Today, the Iraqi opposition still believes the United States wanted Saddam's generals to win. Are you saying, Dr. Chalabi, that the United States got in the way of the uprising and therefore made it impossible?
They deflected the uprising. And they permitted armed helicopters to fly and kill people and shoot them. They were the most significant factor in the suppression of the uprising. They made it possible for Saddam to regroup his forces and launch a devastating counterattack with massive firepower on the people.
Saddam Hussein's revenge drove millions of Iraqis to flee. So by April 1991, the uprising the Bush administration never wanted was over. And the coup it was hoping for hadn't yet happened. The Bush administration both preferred and expected a coup right after the war. Why was there no coup?
There was no coup because Saddam has made himself coup-proof. He will do anything to survive. He anticipates what people will do to him. He has no compunction about destroying thousands of people if he feels that they pose the slightest danger to him. He has done it in the past.
Did you genuinely believe at this period that somewhere in the labyrinth around Saddam Hussein that there was somebody or some group of people who, with what kind of support, would suddenly get rid of him?
With maybe a brigade commander.
General Wafiq Samurai.
There were many occasions to get rid of Saddam Hussein. Saddam frequently would come to our intelligence headquarters with only one guard, and we would have lots of guards with heavy weapons around him. We could have gotten rid of him.
But they did not. Unfinished business. The Iraqi military wouldn't do it, the U.S. military couldn't do it, so now the CIA would have to try. The United States victory in the Gulf War was bittersweet. The Iraqi army had been driven from Kuwait, but Saddam Hussein was still in Baghdad and George Bush was criticized for unfinished business. The president turned to the CIA. Every covert operation undertaken by the CIA requires written authorization from the President of the United States. It is called a presidential finding. In May of 1991, President Bush signed such a finding, directing the CIA to create the conditions for the removal of Saddam Hussein. Is it fair to say from a layman's point of view that it's the nearest thing you can do to try to kill a foreign leader without saying you're going to set out to kill a foreign leader?
That's right, yes.
You create the circumstances where someone else will do it.
Yes.
And in this case, who did you hope would do it?
Some elements within the military. I don't want to say anymore.
In Washington, the thinking had not changed. On May the 28th, the Courier delivered the finding to the man who would have to implement it, the CIA's Near East Division Chief, Frank Anderson. What was your reaction?
I scribbled a note on it that said I didn't like it.
Did you think it was possible to get rid of Saddam Hussein?
We didn't have a single mechanism or combination of mechanisms with which I could create a plan to get rid of Saddam at the time.
There may not have been a plan or much enthusiasm inside the CIA, but there was plenty of money, and so the CIA turned to this man, John Rendon. For 10 years, Rendon had worked as a political consultant. During the Gulf War, he handled public relations for the Kuwaiti government. We asked Rendon what he was doing for the CIA.
Under the laws of the United States, I can't discuss anything that involved U.S. government participation.
Should I extrapolate from this that you can't discuss a relationship you had with the CIA?
I wouldn't discuss it even if I had one.
You set up an office in London using public U.S. funds, and you can't discuss that either?
No, not appropriate for me to have any discussion about U.S. government activity.
According to the Rendon Group's own records, which we have obtained, Rendon spent more than $23 million in the first year of its contract alone. Rendon organized a traveling photo exhibit of Iraqi atrocities. He produced videos and radio skits that ridicule Saddam Hussein, even an anti-Saddam comic book. The mission to eliminate the Iraqi dictator began as a covert public relations campaign.
Do you think that the campaign was designed to bring him down or just to irritate him?
That's a very good question.
So how about a very good answer?
I don't know.
While it was spending millions of dollars on public relations, the CIA was overtaken by events inside Iraq. In May of 1992, Iraqi Kurds held elections for a new regional parliament in northern Iraq. Northern Iraq was protected against Saddam Hussein by Allied aircraft, primarily American, enforcing a no-fly zone. But as Iraqi Kurds took their first steps towards democracy, the Bush administration was unenthusiastic. Kurdish leader Hoshyar Zebari.
Deliberately, I think they did not want that election to take place. First, they doubted our ability to do it. Secondly, they said nobody will accept the outcome of the election. There will be fighting, Kurds will be fighting among themselves.
And so more than 1 million Iraqi Kurds voted in favor of democracy, and the United States wanted no part of it. Shortly after the elections in the north, the leaders of Iraq's other religious and ethnic groups, including Sunni and Shiite Arabs, met with the Kurds to discuss the formation of a coalition government in opposition to Saddam Hussein. It was Ahmed Chalabi, an Arab Shiite, who brought them together.
We reintroduced politics in Iraq. We made a quasi-parliamentary structure which contained the opposition. We had a political program going, we had a media program going, and we had a military program going also.
This was unprecedented in Iraq. They called themselves the Iraqi National Congress, or INC, a name created for them by the CIA's public relations firm. It was difficult for the Bush administration to ignore this new democratic coalition. So in July of 1992, the INC was invited to Washington to meet with the Secretary of State, James Baker, and the National Security Advisor, General Scowcroft. It was a very public display of support.
They told us that they would support the Kurds and the Iraqi people until a democratic alternative to the regime could be established in Baghdad, and they assured us that they would not pursue the dictator alternative.
Did you believe that this was encouragement for the Bush administration to jack up or gear up your organization?
Yes,
and try to do more?
Yes, we thought for the first time the United States supports democracy in Iraq.
What role did you think the Iraqi opposition, might play in this U.S.-inspired, U.S.-led, I guess, effort to overthrow Saddam Hussein?
Not much.
Nevertheless, the CIA began to channel approximately $4 million annually to the Iraqi National Congress, in part to build this radio and television station in northern Iraq, so the CIA could have an Iraqi outlet for the anti-Saddam Hussein propaganda they had spent all that other money on.
Did you believe at the time that the Iraqi National Congress was a viable mechanism by which to overthrow Saddam Hussein?
No. And what I thought they had was a capability to be another problem for them. In fact, a serious problem.
I would not make that the main effort of any attempt to get rid of Saddam, because I think that's the easiest thing for him to defend against. It's the colonel with the brigade patrolling his palace that's going to get him if somebody gets him.
This is a man who once had a brigade in Saddam Hussein's special forces. General Adnan Nouri is the kind of man General Scowcroft and the CIA believe might get Saddam. General Nouri had been out of Iraq since the 1980s, and Ahmed Chalabi had already recruited him to work in the INC. But the CIA wanted General Nouri to work secretly for them. And so in June of 1992, the CIA flew General Nouri to the United States for a secret meeting at this hotel in Tysons Corner, Virginia.
They said, you work separate from INC. but don't resign from INC. Be in the INC, but work separately.
In other words, be in the INC, but work with us. The CIA was moving beyond propaganda. And by the time Bill Clinton was elected president in November of 1992, the agency had gone from waiting for a coup to organizing one. President Clinton picked up where George Bush left off, and he reauthorized the secret presidential finding. Initially, it seemed as if the Clinton administration was enthusiastic about the Democratic INC. Once again, its leaders were invited to Washington. And this White House went a step further. The Vice President himself, Al Gore, announced that the Clinton administration would seek to indict Saddam Hussein and his senior generals as war criminals.
People of the United States believed strongly in a democratic future for Iraq. That is why we have now decided to seek a United Nations commission to investigate the war crimes and crimes against humanity of the Iraqi regime.
But the Vice President may not have understood how this commitment would affect the CIA's plan for a military coup.
Why do you think he was never indicted?
And there's always the lurking feeling in the CIA that should we talk a lot about indicting Saddam Hussein, we would scare all those people who are just sitting there eager to make a coup into not making a coup.
Because?
Because they would be part of the indictment too.
The administration's promise to indict Saddam Hussein and his generals would never seriously be pursued. Encouraged by Washington's enthusiasm, the INC began to build an army. The opposition also wanted to recruit disenchanted units in Saddam Hussein's military to join them. One of the INC's leading members, Nabil Moussaoui, told this to the CIA.
We told them that the Iraqi army is demoralized. We told them that we've established contact with the Iraqi army, the units on the front line. And there are many units that is willing to come across the minute we give them an excuse to come across.
In November of 1993, the president of the Iraqi National Congress flew to Washington to tell senior administration officials about their plans. He briefed the CIA, the Department of State, and the Pentagon at the Key Bridge Marriott Hotel.
And what did you tell them?
I told them that we have a plan to mobilize troops opposed to Saddam Hussein and start operations from the north and from the south, which would have the result of getting rid of Saddam Hussein.
And what did the United States say to you?
Nothing. Nobody mentioned that thing again until 1 year later in the north.
Without American help, the INC operation could not go forward. But 1 year later, the CIA did take the INC seriously and was soon embroiled in their military operations against Saddam. In October of 1994, the CIA finally set up a permanent station in northern Iraq. The agency assigned 3 teams of officers. They lived in this house in the northern town of Salahuddin. From here, they reported to their boss, Frank Anderson, at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia.
Why did you send CIA teams into the north?
What I wanted them to do was be in position to look for this hoped for but yet to be achieved coalition of forces that might put us in a position to move forward against the Saddam regime.
To the Iraqi opposition, the CIA sounded more ambitious.
The Americans said, the United States government has decided to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and we want your help in this.
Who were these American representatives?
The CIA officers.
For CIA case officer Warren Marek, who was a 23-year veteran of the CIA, the instructions seemed deliberately ambiguous.
I think we had kind of a no instructions mode.
Marek led the first CIA team in northern Iraq. The Iraqi opposition knew Marek only by his code name, Ted. He retired only 5 months ago, and he has never before spoken publicly.
We wanted to have access to defectors who might come north into northern Iraq, who our opposition leaders would have access to and turn them over to us, and we would debrief them and learn about what's going on in Baghdad.
The Iraqi opposition intended to do more than gather intelligence for Ted and his CIA colleagues. By now, Chalabi, seen here in the opposition's own video, had worked out the specifics of his plan to get Iraqi army units to defect.
We always thought of ourselves not as an army to fight the Iraqi army. We thought of ourselves as a catalyst to attract Iraqi army units to join us, to defect to us in order to sap Saddam Hussein's power and bring him down.
The Iraqi National Congress didn't have much military experience. They were Democrats. They didn't fit into the coup mold that Washington had in their mindset.
But our view was the United States would at least support us in our effort to do this kind of operation, as indeed they said they would.
Chalabi's confidence in his plan was bolstered by the defection of Saddam Hussein's former chief of military intelligence, General Wafiq Samurai.
I knew the condition of the Iraqi army as well as the attitude of Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi people. Our expectations were correct. I was convinced that Saddam was not able to mount a strong response.
General Samurai became essential to the INC military offensive. The CIA officer who had come to debrief General Samurai was one of the CIA's most experienced operatives. His code name was Bob. Bob was also in the north to get the Kurds, who often fought with one another, to fight together against Saddam Hussein.
He was like a member of the INC. He had full participation. Sometimes he would even give us an update on intelligence of which, if a certain unit has changed on the other side.
In a remarkable series of meetings, Bob appeared to be successful in bringing the feuding factions of the Iraqi opposition into a unified fighting force. He went with Ahmed Chalabi and General Samurai to persuade one of the Kurdish leaders, Jalal Talabani, to join the operation.
Bob was here in Salah ad-Din, and he came to us, he visited us, we received him as a friend, as an American official.
Mr. Talabani came out, asked for Bob to come back and confirm that how the American government position would be regarding the attack.
One of our friends asked Mr. Bob that what is your attitude. He said, we are agreed with this, it is a good step.
Within 5 minutes, the meeting was over with full approval.
By March of 1995, the opposition seemed to be coming together. But events in the north were moving faster than many in Washington would have liked. Robert Pelotro was the senior State Department official responsible for American policy in the Persian Gulf.
At what point did you know that the Iraqi National Congress was planning a March offensive?
Frankly, I did not know of anything until something occurred.
Really?
Yes.
You're the Assistant Secretary of State for Middle East Affairs, and you didn't know about it in its planning stages?
That's the way government works sometimes.
There were those in government who did know what was going on and did not approve, in particular the London station of the CIA. London was home to a group of exiled Iraqi military officers who the CIA had recruited into an organization called the Accord. One of the Accord members was that general who the CIA had recruited in 1992, Adnan Nouri.
The Accord claimed to have ties to the Iraqi military and claimed that they, with planning and with support, they could use those ties to topple Saddam Hussein.
And which of the two did the CIA actively support?
Both sides.
Did the CIA in London have a different view of the way events should transpire on the ground than those of you on the ground in northern Iraq?
They favored the Accord. They thought the Accord was the best way of establishing change within Iraq.
Because the Accord was advocating a military coup, and Washington was comfortable with that.
Frankly, a number of people believed that the only way you were going to succeed in unseating the existing regime was through an internal military coup against it.
Were you one of those people?
Yeah, pretty much.
Still, the plan for the INC offensive in the north continued to go forward. Bob of the CIA, Chalabi, and General Samurai met with the other Kurdish leader, Masoud Barzani. Barzani's troops were essential for any attack on the Iraqi army to be successful.
Bob
came to me with Ahmed Shalabi and Wafiq al-Samarai in this room, and he said, I am the envoy of the United States government and the representative of the U.S. president, and we have decided to change the regime in Baghdad.
But Barzani was nervous. He wanted reassurance that U.S. aircraft already flying protective cover in the north would defend them should Saddam Hussein launch a counterattack.
Masoud says, will you support us if there is a tank attack? Bob says, yes. He says, will there be air support? And Bob says, yes.
According to leaders of the opposition, the CIA case officer on station at the time, Bob, who I think you know, promised them that the U.S. would provide their March 1995 military offensive with air power, if necessary.
If that occurred, that would have been clearly exceeding authority on the part of any U.S. official.
You said if that occurred, and you're not sure if it's occurred.
I'm not sure whether it occurred. I've heard the story myself.
And what do you think of it?
It sounded to me like there might have been a cowboy out there exceeding his instructions.
Rubbish. The guy had full authority. You can't have a renegade running around for so many months, and his office is not aware of what he's doing.
John Deutsch, in March of 1995, was President Clinton's nominee to run the CIA.
According to the Iraqi opposition, Bob sent regular cables back to Washington advising his superiors on what was happening in the north. He's expected to keep Washington absolutely and completely informed of what's going on?
Of course.
So Bob would not have been a renegade?
I don't remember him. I don't know of any renegades that we had in northern Iraq.
48 hours before the attack, Accord member Adnan Nouri flew to Washington. Nouri claimed the INC operation was a fraud designed to draw the United States into another war with Saddam Hussein on behalf of the Iraqi opposition. Nouri alleged that the man responsible for this so-called deception was General Wafiq Samarai.
Wafiq told me that come and we make a plan to deceive the Americans.
General Nouri told the CIA about this alleged deception, and suddenly all Washington was alarmed. The State Department was nervous, the Pentagon had no interest in a military operation, and the National Security Council believed that the Iraqi and Iranian armies in response had gone on full alert. The White House suddenly pulled the plug on the INC.
I mean, the morning of the beginning of the offensive, the CIA officers delivered a message which they said came directly from the National Security Advisor.
Tony Lake.
Which they said, the message said, you are on your own.
The White House cable went on to say, the United States will not support this operation militarily or in any other way.
Were you consulted before the message was sent?
I knew it was going.
And what was your recommendation?
I felt it was the right thing to do.
I said, I don't understand. Perhaps the Americans speak two different languages. They tell us one thing, then send us a message telling us another. It was all lies.
The Kurdish leader Barzani, claiming he'd been betrayed by everyone, withdrew his troops from the operation. Nevertheless, a weakened INC went ahead with the attack.
We proceeded to actually engage Saddam Hussein in battle. We discovered the Iraqi army to be in a much worse than we imagined it to be. These guys were just waiting for a bullet to be fired in the air, not at them, to surrender.
Did you think this was an effective operation?
I thought for what it was, I thought it was a very effective operation.
But without Barzani's troops, the INC coalition began to unravel. Within 4 weeks, the offensive collapsed. Shortly thereafter, the Kurdish factions, led by Barzani and Talabani, went back to fighting each other. And the CIA began to focus exclusively on a military coup. By January of last year, the CIA had cut off all covert funding for the Iraqi National Congress. But the CIA was still trying very hard to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And now, however, it focused exclusively on a military coup. The CIA's covert operation moved here to Amman in Jordan. The CIA director then was John Deutsch.
I would say that we had very careful and very modest expectations about how easily any coup effort could be successful.
Modest expectations maybe, but under Deutsch, the CIA gave an additional $6 million to the former Iraqi military officers in the Accord for the coup plan. But the members of the Accord soon blew their cover, and this was only their first mistake. On February the 16th last year, the members of the Accord held this news conference to announce their secret intentions. It would have been impossible for Saddam Hussein's intelligence network to miss it.
Was there any evidence that the Accord was infiltrated by Saddam Hussein?
There were problems. There were continuing problems. A group such as the Accord would draw the interest of the Iraqi intelligence service.
Still, the CIA went forward. The agency smuggled special communications equipment from Amman into Baghdad so the coup plotters could stay in touch with the CIA. But the courier and his equipment were soon in the hands of Saddam Hussein.
We received reports that the Iraqi intelligence service captured equipment sent by the United States to those officers to use them when they make the coup. And we shared those reports.
Chalabi warned the CIA that Saddam was on to them.
You told the United States the coup was penetrated.
Yes, we did. And they didn't want to hear any bad news about it.
To add insult to injury, Iraqi intelligence agents made contact with the CIA using the captured communications equipment. Gotcha, they said.
Did you at the time believe that made it pretty clear the coup had been penetrated?
I can't comment on that, sir.
The coup plotters were rounded up a year ago today.
Given what came out about how badly this organization was infiltrated, it seems to me that they were very naive in proceeding the way they did.
According to our information, Saddam Hussein began arresting more than 800 military officers on June the 26th. 30 of them at least were executed. Does that qualify as a fiasco?
Absolutely.
Let me say something to you about operations. In the Central Intelligence Agency, like everywhere else in the world, they always have risk. They aren't always successful. These were responsible risks carried out by dedicated individuals, coordinated with an overall government policy.
Responsible or not, the failure of the coup cost many Iraqis their lives. And it did something else. It emboldened Saddam Hussein to take aim at the CIA's former operation in the north, led by the Iraqi National Congress. In the north, the Kurds were not getting along. The INC was just getting along. The CIA was merely observing. Saddam Hussein's army was looking at all this from just across the Zab River, which marks the southern end of the area which the Allies were protecting. But last August, U.S. intelligence detected an Iraqi military mobilization headed towards the Zab and the city of Arbil, the headquarters of the Iraqi opposition. The United States did nothing. Masoud Barzani, who was once again fighting with his Kurdish rival, warned the Clinton administration that he was prepared to invite Saddam Hussein into the U.S. protected area to help him. Still, nothing from Washington. Last August 31st, as Saddam's forces reached the outskirts of Arbil, the other Kurdish leader, Jalal Talabani, phoned Robert Pelotro, the senior State Department official for the region.
I telephoned to Mr. Pelotro. I told him that there is Iraqi, they said if they will commit such a kind of foolish act, there will be serious consequences and strong response.
Do you remember that?
I certainly remember that I spoke with him quite frequently, but I don't think I ever promised him some kind of U.S. intervention.
Did you tell him there would be serious consequences?
Oh, I might have used those words. Whether he jumped to a conclusion that somehow the United States would come riding in or not, I don't know.
Mr. Pelotro, you have a long experience in the region.
When you
would surely know what Mr. Talabani would have thought if you'd told him there were going to be serious consequences.
Quite honestly, Mr. Talabani's first thought might be, why isn't he promising me military intervention? Why is he using such vague words?
Did you tell him that the United States had no intention of preventing Saddam Hussein from invading the North?
No.
The subtlety of Mr. Pellitro's diplomacy was lost on the Iraqi opposition, which still believed that the Americans would protect them against Saddam Hussein, whatever their internal differences. But there were other signs that Washington wouldn't do that.
What happened to the CIA operatives who were working with you in the North?
They left before the invasion.
How soon before the invasion?
Days before the invasion.
Did that tell you something?
It told us that they did not want to be caught in the attack.
4 days after the CIA moved out, Saddam Hussein, invited by Barzani, launched his attack. INC soldier Ahmed Alawi describes the scene on the front line.
There was incredible shelling from the cannons. Sometimes there were 4 to 5 bombs each second. After that, there was the movement of the tanks towards the city.
As the Iraqi tanks approach the city of Arbil, you can see them in these pictures recorded by the opposition. Jalal Talabani assured his men that American aircraft would come to their defense.
I was thinking that if Saddam will attack, there will be at least some bombs on the Iraqi forces which are attacking Arbil.
Everybody was waiting for the American fighters. It was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. They will come at 9 o'clock. We are waiting for the Americans. We are waiting for their promise, and there was no answer. At last, it was 7 p.m., and Erbil was surrounded, and Erbil was right now under the control of the Iraqi troops.
On the same day, August 31st, President Clinton was in Kentucky campaigning for re-election. His advisors told him there were several ways he could respond to the invasion. For 4 days, the president did nothing. And then he ordered a cruise missile attack, not on Saddam's tanks in the north, but on Iraqi radar installations 500 miles to the south. The Iraqi opposition was left to fend for itself. 2 eyewitnesses describe what happened next.
We returned to the opposition headquarters and saw 2 trucks loaded with opposition soldiers. They were shot later in a big ditch.
With everybody watching, more than 150 people were killed.
Do you know what happened to the people the CIA left behind?
You're asking whether some of them were killed. It is very possible that a lot of INC people were killed. But the INC is an independent organization.
Independent? It's the same organization which the United States had named, financed, publicly endorsed, and encouraged to take on Saddam Hussein. Those who were captured were killed. Those who escaped fled to the Turkish border. But the Turks didn't want them. And when news of the disaster hit Washington, the White House turned to damage control. Surviving members of the opposition were evacuated to the island of Guam in the middle of the Pacific, where they were held incommunicado until after the presidential election. Since then, most of them have been resettled in the United States. Others are now in American jails, accused of being spies for Saddam Hussein. The United States wants to send these men back to Baghdad. They say they are innocent, betrayed one last time by the United States.
Okay, so look back for me again and take both operations if you like. You have an Iraqi National Congress effort which fails in the north, with which the CIA is involved. You have the Accord run out of Jordan, ultimately, which fails as well. What does that tell us about our ability to get rid of Saddam Hussein in this fashion?
It tells us that you cannot rely with any degree of confidence on covert action to remove the head of a country, even a very despicable tyrant, without a broader political effort that includes everybody in the region working together. No one should believe that covert action is a silver bullet for removing tyrants.
So how to explain this failure? It certainly looks as if not one but 2 U.S. administrations did not want Saddam Hussein to be overthrown by the Iraqi people. They never believed that the rise of democracy in Iraq would lead to the fall of Saddam. In Washington, they really did prefer the more predictable military coup, the general next to Saddam with the pistol. And it doesn't seem to matter that if there were such a person, he might be just like Saddam Hussein, or worse. I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us, and good night.
On Nightline, he says he sold secrets to the Russians to get money for his kids. An exclusive interview with convicted spy Harold Nicholson tonight.
For more information on this program, visit our internet site at abcnews.com. To order a video cassette or transcript of Peter Jennings reporting, call 1-800-CALL-ABC.
This has been a special presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. ABC News, now always on.
WCPB-TV, Boston.